Hello, and welcome to Religion and Life. I'm your host, Ozzie. Religion and literature often go together. Whether it's sacred scriptures, poems, or legends, the literature of a time and place provides insight into worldviews, values, beliefs, and aesthetic sensibilities. This is what the book Writing Appalachia, an Anthology, demonstrates about the Appalachian Mountains and its people. And I'm fortunate enough today to have one of the editors of that collection, Dr. Catherine Ledford, as my guest. Dr. Ledford, can I call you Catherine?
Absolutely, please do.
So Catherine is with the Appalachian Studies program here at Appalachian State University. And I want to say something about this book and just get your reaction to what I'm going to say. First of all, it's a big book. It's 700 pages plus.
It is.
Monumental achievement. Oh, you have it right there. Yeah, it's
in front of me, so it's a big book.
It is. It's a big book, and what I wanted to say is, it's a book that is not about religion, but it's full of religion. Does that ring true?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a collection of stories from the region, stories about the region. So, as you and your audience well know, religion is a vital element in any community, and that's certainly true for the Appalachian region as well. So, yeah, religion shows up and faith shows up in all elements of the collection of stories here, from the very beginning all the way right through the 21st century when the collection ends. And the faith and religion shows up in all kinds of different types of stories as well. We have a real variety in here.
Yeah, and I want to get to that and talk about how this diversity of literature touches on faith and values and religion. But I want to talk about the book just a little bit before we get to that. And one of the things our viewing audience should know is that this is an award-winning book. It was the 2020 recipient of the Clark Medallion. And I thought I'd just read just a sentence from the committee which chose this book. In a year of very strong competitors for the Clark Medallion, the committee chose the Anthology based on its incredible depth, including the variety of authors, kinds of writing, era of origins, beginning with voices from indigenous nations. So congratulations on the award, and just congratulations on such a monumental task. It's a really landmark book, I think.
Thank you very much, and I'll say thank you on behalf of my co-editor Teresa Lloyd as well. It was a collection that took us way too long to put together. It was a project that went on for many, many years, emerged out of our teaching. Both of us are teachers of Appalachian literature. My colleague Tess Lloyd is retired now, but is taught for years in the English department at East Tennessee State University, just over the mountain from us. And so it's a big book, it's a long project, and we are so happy and delighted that it's finally out there and we can share it with a bunch of other people.
So one of the things the committee noted was great diversity, types of literature, also great diversity time span. How did you go about deciding what to include and what not to include? Because there's great wealth of Appalachian literature over the years.
Yeah, it's about a 750-page book. So there's a lot in there, but I know it'll be hard for people to imagine, but it broke our hearts to have to leave so much great writing out of it, and so many great stories out of it. So in the introduction, we specifically encourage people to, if we have given short shrift to one of your favorite authors, or if you are interested by an author, please, we encourage readers to go out and to find other pieces of writing by those folks. So selecting what pieces would go into this anthology and what we were going to have to leave out was a very hard task. As far as time frame goes, we knew from the beginning of this project that we wanted to take an approach that anthologies of American literature started taking in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And that would be the approach of a long time span and also incorporating certainly, traditional literary genres, fiction, poetry, drama, but also including things that sometimes aren't necessarily thought of as literary. So travel narratives, slave narratives, sermons, labor songs, song lyrics, folklore, not just folklore studies, but to bring folklore into the literary canon as well. So we had a difficult job of deciding what to include or what to leave out, but we've covered from Cherokee oral narratives, that's where the anthology begins, all the way up through the 21st century.
Yeah, that's amazing. And not only is there this, you mentioned many of the genres of literature, this great diversity in the genres, a great diversity in the time expanse, but you spent some time talking about the geography of Appalachia. It's not, how do you define what Appalachia is? And you talk about some of the agrarian and industrial history in Appalachia. And all of this, it seems, comes together in this anthology to give a picture of the culture.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things that we specifically wanted to deal with. Tess Lloyd, my co-editor, she was particularly concerned that we include writing stories of urban Appalachia, suburban Appalachia, in addition to what people sometimes stereotypically think of as Appalachian, a rural environment. So we certainly do have the rural in here, but we have gone very deliberately into urban and suburban settings as well. Another element of the book that you're alluding to is just the geographic scope of the anthology, and we specifically talk about those decisions in the introduction. It's something that Appalachian Studies scholars wrestle with in whatever academic discipline they're working on. So how do you define this region? What are its physical boundaries? Where do mountains begin? Where do mountains end? Geographically, the Appalachian Mountains run all the way from northern Alabama all the way up into Maine, into Canada, and out into the Atlantic Ocean, resurfacing, so to speak, in Europe. So there's you start thinking about, well, just mountains. Well, it becomes complicated very quickly. Cultural definitions of the mountains. Some people argue that, there may be Appalachian Mountains in Vermont and in North Georgia, but those are two very different places. So how do you get how do you create an anthology that handles a cultural definition of the region as well? And then, of course, there's the political definition of the region. And we finally settled on the Appalachian Regional Commission's, the federal agency's definition of the region that was established in 1965. Emerging out of the war on poverty years and some of the economic and political pressures that were in place at that time. So the Appalachian Regional Commission's definition incorporates northern Alabama, northern Appalachia. Actually, we do have northern Alabama and Mississippi as part of the Appalachian Regional Commission's 1965 definition. And then that definition, the Appalachian Regional Commission, extends all the way up into New York and Pennsylvania. So at the end of the day, we decided to adopt that Appalachian Regional Commission definition and to incorporate specifically northern Appalachia elements. We have some amazing writers from the Pittsburgh area, for example.
Yeah, and I love the way you said you were trying to bring in some of the urban Appalachia element as well. One of my favorite writers and one of your colleagues, Mark Powell, some of his stories in Atlanta, and it's really kind of broadens my perspective to start thinking about Atlanta as part of the Appalachian region. So
Knoxville, Charleston, Virginia, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Asheville, North Carolina. So we have, and then those are just the urban areas that are located within the kind of physical boundaries of the region that people talk about. There's also, of course, a diaspora of Appalachian people that have moved into Cincinnati, for example, and Detroit, Michigan, into Chicago. So Appalachian areas from those places as well, where Appalachian people have migrated to.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the selections in the book that may either be about religion, a traditional religion, or even more interesting to me, a kind of deeper spirituality that's either within traditional religions or maybe not within those traditional religions. And one of the first ones that caught my attention, it might be in fact the first selection in the book, and that's a Cherokee creation story.
Yeah.
The legend describes creation as a floating island on a sea of water, and suspended from the sky vault at the cardinal points, and goes on to talk about the creation of animals and plants, humans, and talks about childbirth. In other words, it does what a lot of creation do, explains how the world around us came into being. And it's really kind of a beautiful story. It reminded me a lot of ancient Hebraic creation stories and worldviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And that you're right, that is the very first piece that we have in the anthology. I think that's very appropriate. In that story, there's also a lovely moment where there's a giant buzzard, and the giant buzzard flies down close to the land. And as that buzzard is flapping its wings, where the wings hit the soft earth, valleys formed. And when the buzzard lifts its wings, the mountain ridges are formed. And the Cherokee people saw that the buzzard was creating too many mountains. So it sent the buzzard away. They sent the buzzard away. Said, no, don't create mountains in the entire earth. But the Cherokee people are living in the mountains that great buzzard created with its wings. There's a lovely image.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about this story. It sets creation in the context of the Appalachian region. You get this sacred literature that we find all over the world, but here it's focused on the mountains and the valleys, and it is really a nice story. Oftentimes, since you mentioned the buzzard, oftentimes in ancient myth, birds appear as kind of divine emissaries, doing the work of the gods. So here, it's appropriate that we have this buzzard creating the mountains and the valleys.
I don't think I'll ever look at a turkey buzzard again. You know, here in the mountains, we see them flapping around, and they're so big. My husband and I were lucky enough to see an eagle here in the wild in Western North Carolina, just when we were driving down the road one day, and I thought that was impressive. But I shouldn't overlook that turkey buzzard, that big buzzard.
Yeah, I will have that image in my mind now. And turkey buzzards are, we tend to, they're scavengers, right? So they sort of take dead things and turn them into new life. So that might be part of what's going on with the turkey buzzard's role in creation or recreation in this story.
Good point.
Yeah. So another one that caught my mind, and then I want you to share one of your favorites maybe, but there's one selection in, I think it's in the folklore section of the book, and it's a piece by R.H. Pittman, and he shares a couple of narratives about religious conversion.
Mm-hmm.
So this is more what I'm familiar with when I think about traditional religions, but I wanted just to read the first sentence of this conversion story, and then make you and I can comment on it as we go through it. Webb Elder Daniel Smith of Hillsville, Virginia, son of Elder Isaac and Malaysia Jane Webb, was born in Carroll County, Virginia, March 5th, 1855. The second Sunday morning in June 1867, He was riding along horseback thinking that someday he'd be a rich man and at a very old age would get religion. Suddenly, a very dark object appeared coming directly at him. It almost sounds like since we're getting close to Halloween, the beginning of a horror story, right? And of course, that very dark object is death, right? Coming at him. So as a young man, he realizes that maybe he doesn't have as much time as he thought. And the story goes on to talk about his conversion to religion, changed his ways, and eventually he became a minister. But a few things stood out to me, though, about this, and maybe you can comment on it. The first of all was the specificity, a time and a place. And oftentimes this is part of conversion stories. People want to be able to point to a certain time and place and say, this is where I got religion, or this is where I got saved, and so forth. And then this supernatural element in this story is really quite nice. There are visions, the appearance of something that's dark and foreboding, a couple of visions and dreams, and so forth. Do you find this in a lot of Appalachian stories?
Yeah, I think so. There's and this really, connects in with a folklore, kind of a focus on in Appalachian writing about folklore. I know you have done quite a bit of scholarship on Lee Smith, one of the great Appalachian writers, and in Lee Smith's novels and short stories, she certainly incorporates elements of the supernatural, elements of faith, all kinds of different manifestations of that. So, yeah, here we have an example of a specific, this is not a piece of fiction, this is a different type of writing. As you said, it's a conversion narrative. So it's intended to be didactic, it's intended to teach, it's intended to demonstrate that person's experience. And you're very right, we do see woven within that these elements of visions, these elements of dreams, and then the person and the person's family and community members taking those visions and those dreams and then putting them to work in their own lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The second story is interesting too. The second conversion story is a woman, Mrs. Tanisha Ann Hardy, I guess is how you pronounce that. But she was sitting at a loom weaving a fine dress when she got convicted of sin, and stopped weaving the dress, and forever after dressed mildly and meekly and plainly. And this woman eventually became a leader in the church, a deaconess, I think. Is there a kind of history of Appalachian women carrying on religious and spiritual roles?
Oh, goodness. I'm not sure I can speak to that. I can say that in the stories that we've encountered as we were going through trying to figure out what to include and what not to include, we came across so many powerful women. And sometimes those women's powers do emerge from the roles that they're playing in community. And I think that's one of the pieces of intersection. So playing a role in a faith community, playing a role in a church, playing a role in the life of a community. The idea of the granny woman, right? This woman who is oftentimes a midwife. This would have been in earlier years before easier access to doctors in modern healthcare. But so you have this tradition of granny women who not only are knowledgeable about serving as midwives, but also know the folklore of the area, know what plants, what animals to engage with. So a whole kind of panoply of just community engagement through those women. Emma Bell Miles. We have a selection, a chapter from Emma Bell Miles's memoir. It's called Grandmothers and Sons. And in that chapter, you get to see these really powerful women who are mentoring younger women, and then also figuring in their community and also figuring out how to deal with those boys, right? How to deal with their sons and their grandsons, controlling them in some sense, teaching them. So I think back to your question of women's roles in Appalachian churches, I think, we could certainly point to examples like we have in this conversion narrative of women who played formal roles in their church communities, but I think we also have lots of examples of women who are just influential in the community and may not have official roles.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I've shared a couple of my favorites. I could go on, but you were telling me about one of your favorite stories that kind of touches on religion and spirituality. Maybe you can describe that one for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a challenging story. I must warn you and folks who are watching. It's called Parson John Bullen's Lizards. It's a piece by George Washington Harris from the 1830s. George Washington Harris wrote from Knoxville. He was born in Pittsburgh, I believe, but came to Knoxville and spent his life there. And he developed this character. This character's name is Sut, S-U-T, Sut Lovingood. And Washington Harris creates this. It's a mountain character, so he's a mountain man. And he shows up, Sut Lovingood shows up in a series of stories that George Washington Harris published in the Knoxville newspaper at the time, before the Civil War. After the Civil War, Harris collected these stories and published them in a collection together. But they all center around this character named Sut Lovingood. And Sut is a mountain man, but he is a ne'er-do-well. He is a jokester. He is a drunkard. He is somebody who challenges authority in the community, and he's all the time getting into trouble. And people are all the time frustrated with him in the community. But this particular story is called Parson John Bullen's Lizards. It tells the tale of Sut. He was at a camp meeting. So some of your audience members may know what a good old-fashioned camp meeting is. That would be a religious meeting held outdoors, kind of a revival kind of experience. So Sut is at this camp meeting, and he's in the bushes, and he is making out with a girl from the community. And the Parson John Bullen, catches them and makes a big deal out of it. He exposes them to everybody. He hits Sut over the head with a big stick and knocks him out. And when Sut comes to, Sal, the girl, has run off, and Parson John has embarrassed them. Parson John later on promises the girl that he won't tell on her, that he won't tell her mother that he caught Sut and the girl making out in the bushes. And she says, please don't tell. If you do, I'll make you a really great Sunday dinner. And the parson says, okay. He comes, he eats the lovely meal that Sal has made, and then goes and tells her mother that he her cheating, kissing in the bushes with Sut, and her mother gives her a whipping, and this enrages Sut. He thinks this is so unfair. He thinks that the parson is just the lowest down. He calls him something, I should have marked it, but a low down, darn, scuzzy fool. Just up and down the other, hates him. And then so Sut cooks up this idea to get revenge on the parson for exposing Sal. And at another church meeting, Sut comes in acting all penitent, and he's got in his bag a surprise. He's brought a bag with him. The Parson John starts delivering one of those great hellfire and brimstone sermons to get everybody in the congregation all whipped up, and the parson is saying, if you don't change your ways, you're going to feel the serpents of hell. He calls them hell serpents. You're going to feel the hell serpents, and they're going to be around your neck, and they're going to stick their tongues in your ears, and you're going to feel them crawling all over your body. Well, about that time, Set goes around behind the parson and crouches down behind him, and Set has a bag of lizards, and he takes the bag of lizards and puts them right at the bottom of the preacher's pant legs and squeezes their tails, and they run up the parson's clothes. So all of a sudden, the parson feels the hell serpents all over him, right? And he's a sinner. He's going to hell. So he starts flinging stuff to get his clothes off. He exposes himself. He throws a bottle of whiskey out of his pockets. He throws a whole chicken out of his pockets. He throws his clothes off. So he's exposed physically in front of his congregation, and they see that he's tobacco. He throws tobacco out of it. So
all the vices, right?
All the vices, are exposed. And so the story really revolves around this character, Set Lovingood, speaking truth to power, right? He's the one in the community who has no power. He's the man who has the drinking problem himself. He gets no respect in the town. He's considered a clown, but he's really exposing the parson. The parson is a liar. The parson drinks. The parson is a glutton. The parson smokes. All of those things, and Set Lovingood exposes him. In that story.
That's quite a tall tale. I think I like your stories better than mine. I picked out sermons and conversion stories, and then you come up with this great tall tale.
Like I said, it's a challenge. It is a challenge for folks because it's written in dialect. That was kind of a in the 19th century. So I teach this story every semester to an Appalachian literature class. In an Appalachian literature class I teach, and my freshman and sophomore, junior, senior undergraduates really struggle with it until I give them the tip to stop trying to read it and speak it out loud. Just read it out loud, and oftentimes that gets them going. It's a really funny story.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. Catherine, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I just want to thank you for joining us today. And again, extend my congratulations to you on the publication of this book and the award you won recently. And we'll have to come back again and talk further about Appalachian literature. But thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's it for Religion and Life for this week. I hope you'll join us next week here on App TV as we continue to explore the many ways religion and culture interact in our society. Until then, this is Ozzie Ostwald.